Perhaps you've heard me say that we were born in the image of God, created in the image of God, but not in his likeness. If we were in his likeness, we would think like he does, talk like he does, do what he does, understand him perfectly in his likeness. However, that is exactly what he's doing with us. When we're born of the Spirit of God, we come into the kingdom of God and the family of God, and we come into the purpose of God. And that purpose is to bring us into his likeness. It's a process. It's a process that requires that we understand him. It's a process that we pay attention to him and that we do what he tells us to do. There's a simplicity. But I'd like to go in another direction as well. All of the New Testament writers talked about something. They talked about tribulation and trials, trouble. The devil is in the world, and he's there as God's servant, and he does bring trouble our way. There's no question about it. He's an adversary that we're called to overcome. He's an adversary who presses us and who pushes against us. He tempts us. He at times leads us into areas that we shouldn't be, which brings tribulation in our lives. God delivers us from it. But tribulation is a part of the process, and it's a major part of the process. The Apostle Paul says that we rejoice in tribulation, Romans chapter 5. Peter said we should arm ourselves with the mind to suffer, because this is the will of God. Why? James said, count it all joy when you fall into different temptations and trials. Why would I do that? Because that is the process, that is the way that God has chosen to transform us into his image. It's not the only way, but it is a major way. None of us can escape. And you know, the details of tribulation are so many and so intimate that to start talking about them does not make any sense at all. But what do we do with tribulation, and why would we do it? Well, we embrace it. I'd like to talk about Job just for a minute. I love that man. I love his wife. I know we've heard all the stories. She cursed God and all that. Well, a lot of us have done that in our lives. So, Job was a righteous man. He sat in the gates. He took care of the poor. He was a man of counsel and wisdom. And he knew God. Well, wait a minute. Did he know God? Well, he knew about God, that's for sure. He believed in God. He thought he knew God. Then tribulation came his way. And we see that it was the enemy that came in and affected him. Killed his children, burned his farm, killed all of his animals, took away his money. But it was God who egged the devil on to do it. But God held him and kept him and brought him through. He would get to the end of Job, and what does he say? Well, I heard about you with my ears. That's the extent of what I knew you, but now I see you with my eye. That tribulation didn't add anything to him. It took something away. It took away blindness. That's what tribulation does with us. When you receive Jesus Christ into your spirit, you receive the whole fullness of God. Completely. That's right. Everything God is in you if you're born again. So then what does tribulation do? Tribulation strips the humanity. Tribulation does not hit your spirit, it hits your soul, hits your mind, your will, your emotions, hits your flesh. That which is not conformed to God. He removes those things like ashes from the dust. He removes those things to reveal Christ in us. That's the value of tribulation. So then how should I respond to tribulation? Well, Job responded in a bad way because he didn't understand, and most of us, that's how we responded. Oh, I'm in trouble. Oh, I got to get out of this trouble. It enlarges our hearts before God when we embrace the trouble, the pain more than anything. If we embrace the pain, it does something in us. You know, I see all these Facebook posts. If somebody did you wrong, stay away from them. Jesus didn't do that. That's not Jesus. Jesus is vulnerable. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure he's vulnerable to you. Look at you, and yet he'll come to you and he'll love you. and he'll love me because he's vulnerable. I'm going to talk about Jesus and his life in another video here before long. At any rate, so tribulation really does work patience in us. Now, patience is not easy to describe. Patience has to be lived. Patience is something that we experience, not something that we teach. Nobody teaches patience except God. And it's a very personal thing to bring us into a place of patience and long suffering. That's what tribulation does for us. The action, patience has a work in us. It transforms us. You know, God might have called you to preach, he might have called you to build an ark, he might have called you to a lot of things. But the very basic foundation of what God's called you to do is to be transformed. And there's nothing you can do about that except acquiesce to him. Seek him, love him, do what he says to do. But it's he who works in you both to will and to do his good pleasure. So embrace tribulation, embrace the problem, and let God take you through it. The end of Job was that God restored him completely, gave him 10 more children, he kept his wife, got his money back, got his farm back, and he's got a testimony. I meet a lot of Christians that don't have a testimony. What are you talking about? They don't have a testimony. Their testimony is about somebody else and what they've done or what they're doing and who they are. But their own testimony is not there for some reason. I remember meeting a couple years ago, and when I first saw this, they were lovely people. They went to church. They seemed to love God, it seemed. But they didn't have a testimony. Their testimony was always about somebody else. Let God give you a testimony about your life. A testimony of his faithfulness. And the big faithfulness is that he transforms us. And he brings us into a place where we're pliable with him. So embrace the pain in your life. Embrace the loss. It's okay. I see Facebook posts that, pain is something you're going to have from this for the rest of your life. Well, that's your choice. You don't have to, Jesus died to take away your pain. He died. You're going to have pain, but he heals our pains and our diseases and our sicknesses. He heals our minds. But we have to let him transform us in the process. So that's what I'm really talking about today, is the transformation process that includes trouble, trials, tribulation. So, God bless you, and go with God, would you? Bye.